Ohio State will travel to Maryland. 27.5 point road favorite, over under 62.5. Really fascinating game to break down because Maryland's offense, which had a ton of potential, flashed it at times, at Michigan early in the season. But then Tagovailoa got hurt. He came back. He missed a game. He came back, and he's been a shell of himself. The offense has just looked absolutely miserable, and he looks hesitant. He's pulling the ball down and not trusting his protection, and the offense has been broken. They've scored 10 total points over the past 2 games. I know they went up against an elite Penn State secondary, but what did he throw for 50 yards last week? Now, the other thing to keep in mind is the weather hasn't been great in their past 2 games, but and they might get their offensive guard Lunsford back, who's pretty important to their protection. But man, the offense has been bad. Can they find it? Can they rally here? Because the Maryland defense has actually been better than I had thought coming into the season. On the surface, this line is too high, especially if I could get 28. I might have to take it. But after seeing the Maryland offensive output the past 2 weeks, it's very scary. And again, with Ohio State, it's like the lack of data points that we have to really know just how good they are. It's difficult. What do you see here?
You're right. The number should be 23.5. Or I'm sorry. The number should be 22.5. It should not be as high as it is. And I already had hesitations with this Ohio State team in the first place. I've been saying for weeks that CJ Stroud is not what we think that he is as a Heisman contender. Now, I put out a fun trend out there on Twitter. Since 2009, Ohio State's covered just twice in week 11 for overlooked at Michigan. For those reasons, it's kind of fun to throw that really small sample size trend out there. But a lot of questions here with the Buckeyes, right? They're expected to get some reps from TreVeyon Henderson, from Mayan Williams coming back from injuries. And we just talked about how Michigan needs JJ McCarthy to be in sync. Well, Ohio State needs these running backs to be ready to go for Michigan. So how many reps will they get? I guess we'll see. And Ohio State dominated Indiana and Penn State, particularly through the air with 320 yards. CJ Stroud finally broke out of his turnover-worthy play funk. He had 5 TDs against Indiana, 2 turnover-worthy plays. He now has a 21-15 ratio of big-time throws to turnover-worthy plays. So he's not completely clear. I mean, it is the Indiana secondary. And his favorite target by far is Marvin Harrison Jr. He got targeted 12 times. If you look at the next 3 targets, Julian Fleming, Cade Stover, and Emeka Egbuka, they had 12 targets, right? So Marvin Harrison Jr. is getting the lion's share of all this. And he is the most – I just filled out my Biletnikoff what is it, pre-nominee, getting ready for the finals and the voting. Yeah, I had Marvin Harrison Jr. at the top, and it was because he's, one of the most explosive wide receivers at 3.4 yards per route run. So, I mean, he's a sight to watch. And Maryland does have 2 players in the secondary that rank highly in coverage grading. Bo Braid, safety, he's 30th in PFF's coverage grading. Deonte Banks at corner, he's 129th. And these are individual ranks, right? So that's very high even to be in the top 200. So we'll see what they do. And Banks is the one that's probably directly going to go up against Marvin Harrison. Maryland, I couldn't believe this when I read it, but Maryland is second nationally in defensive pass expected points. They've given up 28 passes of 20 yards, but it's been happening in their own territory, which is, kind of a factor into expected points. And
they've been one of the most underrated defenses that people don't think is good in the country.
Right. And teams are scoring on Ohio State with sustained drives. So if I flip to the other side, and I want to back Maryland here because I do, and the number's inflated, teams are scoring with sustained drives. Indiana had 4 drives and scored 14 points. That's pretty average. I throw out Northwestern. There was some bad weather there. But Penn State, remember, we got the cover there, and Sean Clifford did everything to give it away. They scored 24 points on 5 trips past the 40, and that might be the most prolific offense that Ohio State has had to go up against. Ohio State, believe this or not, is outside the top 100 in defensive red zone percentage. What is going on with this defense, especially up against the red zone? So there's serious issues here for me with Ohio State. Stroud's season-long numbers with turnover-worthy plays, the defense in scoring position and in red zone. So stuck right as I got to the moment to submit the bet on Maryland, I went over to a book, a very big book that is out there for everybody that does look-ahead lines, and it has Michigan +8. So let's talk about that line next week. Right now, if that game was played this week, I would make that 7. SP Plus would make that game 4.5. I can't see anything happening with Michigan, Illinois, that is going to make that thing float above a touchdown. So I was happy to take Michigan plus
Well,
8.
unless Illinois wins.
Unless Illinois wins, I'm not betting on it, especially with Chase Brown, right? So I took a Michigan plus 8 look ahead line. That is sort of a bet you can make with these two look ahead lines for the biggest game on the docket next week.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be on Maryland here.
I want
just
to.
I'm going to dig a little more. I just want to get some confidence that Tagovailoa is going to be like, that he's just going to be a little bit more confident back there in the pockets. It's coming back from injury. He's got a couple games under his belt. The weather hasn't helped. The talent is there on that offense. So yeah, I definitely think that this number is inflated and Maryland is the side.